As someone who spent decades on the range, testing personal defense loads and following the political tug of war over ammunition regulation, I've watched the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, what we all know as the ATF, shift its rulebook more times than I can count. The most concerning trend is how they twist long-standing laws to put the squeeze on ammunition that's been legal and trusted for generations. A prime example happened nearly 10 years back, when the ATF targeted a standard rifle cartridge not because anything about the bullet had changed, but simply because they decided to reinterpret the law. And make no mistake, that same playbook is being dusted off again, this time with high-performance handgun rounds in the crosshairs. At the center of the current storm are three of the most dependable self-defense loads you can get your hands on: Speer Gold Dot, Federal Hydra-Shok, and Hornady Critical Defense. These rounds are everyday staples for concealed carriers, homeowners, and law enforcement officers alike. Ironically, the same design elements that make them so effective: bonded jackets that hold together through barriers, polymer tips that promote reliable expansion, and internal structures that resist clogging, are now being painted as evidence of so-called armor-piercing capability by regulators eager to tighten their grip. To see where this is heading, you have to look at how the ATF has historically classified ammunition. Their decisions often hinge on whether a cartridge can be used in a handgun and whether it has materials or features they view as excessive for civilian use. The catch? They've long relied on vague language about sporting purposes to justify bans. Just look at what happened with the 7.6, a military surplus round from Russia that civilian shooters used for years without issue. But the moment someone built a pistol that could chamber it, the ATF pulled a 180 and banned it outright. It wasn't about a change in the projectile, it was all about the platform. That exact same logic could soon be used to justify banning self-defense ammo that millions of law-abiding Americans depend on. Take Speer's Gold Dot as a case in point. This ammunition wasn't built for plinking, it was developed from day one for professional duty. It's designed to punch through real-world barriers like auto glass and plywood without losing integrity. That's the kind of performance the Federal Bureau of Investigation demanded when it adopted the SS-109, or as we all know it, the M855 green tip. In testing, Gold Dot consistently meets or exceeds the 12-inch minimum for gel penetration, with many loads hitting closer to 18 inches while retaining their weight and expanding to half an inch or more. That kind of performance is exactly what a daily carrier counts on, but to the ATF, it could be the perfect excuse to start labeling it overkill for civilian use. And it gets more complicated. Gold Dot isn't tied to one caliber, it shows up in just about everything: 9mm, 38, special, plus P, 45 automatic Colt pistol, 10mm auto, and even rifle rounds like 223 Remington, 300 Blackout, and 308 Winchester. That broad availability is a double-edged sword, because now, with so many pistol-style firearms chambered in calibers traditionally reserved for rifles, the ATF sees an opening. We've already lived through this once back in 2015 when the green tip round was nearly banned simply because it could be fired from an AR pistol. Public outrage forced them to back down, but the legal foundation they built is still in place, ready to be used again. If the ATF decides to crack down on what they call excessively capable ammunition, especially if it's linked to law enforcement but still sold on the civilian market, Gold Dot would be a prime target. Its excellent real-world performance, broad adoption, and cross-platform use make it too visible to fly under the radar. And again, the threat wouldn't come from any change to the ammo itself. It would come from shifting definitions and political agendas. This isn't alarmism, it's a hard truth. Anyone who carries, hunts, or keeps a defensive carbine at home should be paying attention. Looking at this from the lens of a seasoned American shooter who studied the rise and fall of ammunition regulations, Federal's Hydra-Shok is another case that proves how quickly the political winds can shift. Born out of the devastating 1986 Miami shootout, this round was built to fix a real flaw: older hollow points that failed to expand when passing through heavy clothing. Designer Tom Berchinski came up with a revolutionary solution: a center post inside the cavity that forces fluid outward into the jacket upon impact, guaranteeing reliable expansion even at modest velocities. Once the Federal Bureau of Investigation updated its protocols in the late 1980s, Hydra-Shok was tweaked to meet those standards and soon became the gold standard for defensive hollow points. But what started as a badge of honor may now be used as a strike against it. Because Hydra-Shok was purpose-built to meet the demands of federal law enforcement, it fits neatly into the ATF's 2015 sporting purpose doctrine, the very language they use to justify deeper scrutiny. According to that framework, any ammunition originally created for police or military use and available in compact calibers like .32 automatic Colt pistol, .380, 9mm, or even .44 Magnum raises regulatory red flags. Hydra-Shok is offered in all of those cartridges and more, meeting the ATF's test for rounds that may be used in a handgun, one of the key qualifiers when reviewing ammo under armor-piercing standards. Another critical factor in this equation is what these bullets are actually made of. As it stands today, Hydra-Shok relies on a traditional lead core, but with more states pushing for environmental reforms and implementing restrictions on lead-based ammunition, manufacturers may soon have no choice but to pivot towards solid copper or brass projectiles. And that's where things get complicated. Under the Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act, also known as LEOPA, any projectile composed of specified metals like brass or copper that can be fired from a handgun and has the potential to defeat soft armor could end up reclassified. That means if Federal alters Hydra-Shok in response to eco-friendly mandates, they may unknowingly walk themselves right into a federal restriction, even though this round has never been linked to a single incident of vest penetration in real-world use. We've already watched something similar unfold with the 7N6, a surplus 5.4 5x39mm cartridge from Russia. Once a pistol was manufactured to chamber that round, the ATF shut down its import back in 2016. The importer challenged the decision in court, pointing out that there was no evidence the round had ever been used against law enforcement. But the judge sided with the agency anyway, ruling that the mere possibility of armor penetration was enough to justify the ban. That verdict cemented the ATF's authority to block virtually any ammunition it deems problematic, especially if it can be fired from a handgun, regardless of its history. Now let's talk about Hornady's Critical Defense line. On the surface, it might seem like a safer bet. The flex-tip expanding bullet, known as FTX, uses a soft polymer insert to kick-start expansion, even when fired from compact pistols with short barrels. It's a popular pick for folks living in apartments or townhomes who want to reduce the risk of overpenetration. But here's the catch. That iconic red tip, while functional, also makes it an easy target for anti-gun media and politicians. It's highly visible, easily identified on camera, and can be spun into something it's not. Add to that The fact that FTX bullets are available in both traditional lever gun calibers like 30-30 Winchester and small handgun rounds, and now you've got ammunition that spans nearly every platform, a potential red flag for regulators. This kind of wide distribution was exactly what caused a political firestorm back in 2015, when members of Congress grilled then ATF Director Todd Jones about the dangers of overreach. Their concern was clear. By placing restrictions on multi-platform ammunition, you're not just inconveniencing criminals, you're penalizing the everyday American shooter. They argued that most gun owners simply want consistent performance across different firearms. But lawmakers also brought up a serious concern that still hangs over the industry: environmental lawsuits that aim to ban the use of lead entirely. And when ammo makers respond to those lawsuits by switching to lead-free materials like copper, they're also stepping into the very same territory the ATF treats as exotic under its armor-piercing criteria. That means even rounds created for hunting in states with lead bans like Critical Defense could be redesigned with all copper construction, only to find themselves banned a year later. The ATF holds discretionary power to deny any exemption if they believe there is substantial evidence the round isn't primarily used for sporting purposes. And that phrase, sporting purposes, is so vague, it could easily be twisted to ban nearly every defensive hollow point on the market. What started as a regulation meant to protect police officers has slowly turned into a legal minefield for millions of responsible, law-abiding Americans. From where I stand as someone who's spent years immersed in the American firearms culture, what we're seeing is a slow but steady mission creep. The kind of mission creep that could eventually bring proven defensive loads like Gold Dot, Hydra-Shok, and Critical Defense under serious federal scrutiny. So far, there's been no formal ruling from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives aimed at these specific rounds. But if you've watched this agency operate for long, you already know they don't always wait for Congress to act. Time and time again, they've sidestepped the legislative process by posting new rules directly to the Federal Register, bypassing public debate altogether. We've been down this road before. Think back to the attempted reclassification of the MT55 green tip round in 2015. That effort sparked major backlash, not just from the gun community, but from members of Congress as well. Enough heat was generated to put the brakes on the proposal for a while, but the foundation of that regulatory push? It was never dismantled. It's still sitting there in the background, ready to be activated again. So let's talk brass tacks, what's really on the line here. Gold Dot is known for its bonded core, built specifically to prevent separation and ensure consistent expansion through barriers. Hydra-Shok uses its center post to keep expansion going, even after passing through thick clothing. Critical Defense relies on its polymer tip design to function properly out of short-barreled carry guns. These aren't gimmicks. These features were engineered to stop threats, not punch holes in body armor. None of these rounds are built with steel, tungsten, or brass cores like actual armor-piercing munitions. And yet, because of evolving definitions, changing political pressures, and environmental mandates, all three could end up on the wrong side of the law. But here's the real kicker. Under the Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act, also known as LEOPA, what really matters isn't the designer's intent, it's the way the bullet is physically built. If a cartridge is capable of being fired from a handgun, and it either contains certain prohibited metals or has a jacket that weighs more than 1/4 of the total bullet mass, then it could be reclassified as armor-piercing, even if it was never designed with that purpose in mind. And this law doesn't require the round to actually defeat body armor. Just meeting the material and construction standards is enough. That means if bonded copper ever gets added to the list of restricted alloys, trusted defensive rounds like Gold Dot, or any future lead-free variants of Hydra-Shok or FTX, could find themselves regulated out of reach. What makes matters worse is how often anti-gun activists misrepresent expanding bullets, especially hollow points, as so-called cop-killer rounds. Even though real-world law enforcement encounters routinely show that standard soft armor stops these rounds, public perception doesn't always follow science. And once a cartridge becomes popular for concealed carry or law enforcement duty, it's ripe for demonization in the aftermath of a tragedy. It doesn't take much. One news story, one courtroom exhibit, one marketing brochure that talks about enhanced barrier penetration or tactical effectiveness, and suddenly a round like Critical Defense or Hydra-Shok deep becomes the centerpiece in an emotional push for more regulation. The ATF doesn't usually kick the door in. They work in phases. First, they go after the low-hanging fruit military surplus rounds with steel cores or obscure foreign ammunition. If the public response is weak, they push the boundary further. Next might be high-end bonded handgun ammunition like Gold Dot, followed by polymer-tipped projectiles or post-style designs that happen to be made from non-lead materials. Consider Hydra-Shok Deep. It's a modern update designed to reach deeper into ballistic gelatin while still expanding properly. But in today's political climate, where potential misuse is often treated the same as actual misuse, that kind of enhanced terminal performance could be used as justification for banning it altogether. Even when lawmakers intervened during the 855 controversy, it served as a temporary shield, not a long-term fix. Political climates shift. A new administration or a sudden, high-profile crime involving a widely used defensive caliber could easily trigger a new wave of restrictions. And odds are, it won't be exotic rounds on the chopping block. It'll be the ones most commonly used by average Americans to protect their families. That's why situational awareness is so important, not just at the range, but in the courtroom and on Capitol Hill. Stockpiling trusted ammunition before new rules go into effect, keeping an eye on the Federal Register for proposed ATF rule changes, and staying engaged during public comment windows, all of that matters. So does contacting your elected representatives to remind them that the Second Amendment doesn't just protect firearms, it protects the tools that make those firearms useful. The bureaucrats often rely on public apathy. What keeps their power in check is our vigilance. Bottom line, ammunition like Gold Dot, Hydra-Shok, and Critical Defense represent the pinnacle of modern self-defense engineering. But because they work so well, because they're widely trusted, and because they carry real-world credibility with armed citizens and law enforcement alike, they're also sitting squarely in the regulatory crosshairs. In today's environment, the most effective loads are often the first ones to come under fire.